Hello and welcome to our today's webinar on the topic of how to optimize your medtech risk management with ISO 14971. I'm Jan Kugel, the director at Qualistory, and I will be your host for today. At Qualistory, we are dedicated to empowering professionals in regulated industries to stay current with latest trends through engaging webinars. And we provide a platform where top experts and leaders share their practical experience and insights. And now a very quick overview of today's topics. So this ISO standard is essential for managing risks effectively throughout your medical devices lifecycle. And getting this right is critical for regulatory approval and successful market entry. In this webinar, you'll hear how to implement best practices in risk management and discover tips to control risks while driving a right first time approach. And I would like to thank our event partner, Qualio. So Qualio was founded in 2012, and they provide the first cloud-based quality management software designed specifically for life sciences companies. And their platform helps medical device and pharmaceutical companies simplify and optimize critical quality processes with flexibility and security. And now let me introduce Lola Furlong, who will be our co-moderator for this session. She will introduce our main speaker for today, Naveen Devagan, and she will also monitor the questions during the webinar and address them to our keynote speaker. And with that in mind, let's get started. Lola, the stage is yours.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jan. So welcome again, everyone. If we want to move to the next slide, I know you've mentioned the agenda. We'll just dive into it a tiny bit deeper. We're going to focus on why ISO 14971 matters to the FDA, how to align your risk management strategies, optimizing the ISO 14971 lifecycle. We'll then take just a few minutes to look at how you can ensure you are continuously compliant to standards like ISO 14971 using Qualio. And then we'll finish up with a Q&A session with Naveen. So now to the introductions. I'm a senior quality success manager at Qualio, and before joining the company, I worked in quality and compliance roles in large multinationals and startups across Europe and North America. So, Naveen, if you wouldn't mind just moving to the next slide. I've used my prior experience in EQMS implementation to work closely with customers in Qualio so that they can achieve their quality goals and bring their product to the market efficiently. I'm delighted today to be joined by one of our customers, Naveen Devagan. Naveen is a recognized leader in the medical device development industry with over 30 years of experience working with teams across North America, Europe, and Asia. With a background in electronics and biomedical engineering, he has built a career leading innovation and development at organizations such as SleepMed, Medtronic, and Fresenius, as well as founding his own startup. So today, Naveen heads Digital Health Solutions, where he partners with startups and large companies alike to bring medical products from concept through development, FDA approval, and into the market. His expertise spans the full product lifecycle, offering end-to-end solutions in research and development, product design, regulatory and quality system strategy, and ISO 13485 contract manufacturing. He is especially passionate about tailoring quality systems that not only meet regulatory requirements, but also support efficient, scalable growth for medical technology companies. With his deep experience and unwavering commitment, Naveen continues to drive innovation in healthcare technology, often saying that he will never retire. So before I hand the presentation over to him, we're going to run two quick polls. I'll start by asking you, what is your main compliance challenge right now? So is it understanding the regulations and standards, knowing where you're currently compliant and where you aren't, preparing for audits, or monitoring your QMS and ensuring continued compliance? So I'll give that just another few seconds. Having worked in industry myself for years, I have an idea of what I would think is the main challenge. We'll give you another 5 seconds.
Excellent. So I will now close the poll and share the results. So Lola, back to you.
Perfect. So, number one that came up was understanding the regulations and the standards, the requirements within those, followed by knowing where you are currently compliant and where you aren't. Preparing for audits has actually come out at top. Everyone is feeling good about that, so I'm glad to hear that. And then monitoring your QMS, that was actually very close to number two. So the great news is if you stay tuned, we do have a demo from Colin on our product team that's really going to help you with these challenges. So I'm going to move on to our second question, and it focuses on what tools you're using for medtech quality risk and compliance activities right now. So here you can actually select more than one option. Are you using paper? Are you using spreadsheets, or online folders such as SharePoint and OneDrive? Or do you have a dedicated EQMS? So again, pop your answers in, and Jan, when you get enough responses, let me know, and I'd be happy to talk through those. Um, Thank you again to everyone who is joining. I can still see that we're getting some participants from America this time, so thank you so much for joining us. I myself have experience with all four of those answers on the screen. I know number four is my preference. I'm very happy to be working in the EQMS space now.
Give a few more seconds. So when I
Yeah,
started my career going back 30 years was all paper, but we use all now spreadsheet, online folders, and folio. Right. So that's our journey.
excellent. And back to you, Lola, with the results.
Perfect. So, what came out on top were the online folders, so SharePoint and OneDrive. I'm not surprised to see that at all. Second to that is your dedicated EQMS. Anyone who wants to inquire more about Qualio, feel free to drop a question into the chat. And then spreadsheets and paper. It's nice to actually see paper as the smallest option there. We all know, manual tracking of compliance is a lot more time consuming. Perfect. So what we'll do now is we will jump into the presentation and I will hand you over to Naveen.
Lola, thank you very much. And Jan, thank you for organizing this. Very happy to be here. And seems like we have more than 160 people, probably crossed 200 from all over the world. So I'm very thankful for the opportunity. And I hope the presentation we've put together is educational and entertaining for all of you. So a little bit more about myself. Like Lola mentioned, my background is engineering, spans 30 years doing medical device product development. Early in my career as an engineer, working on software for electromechanical products, and then some leadership roles, working with regulatory and manufacturing. And now I have my own consulting company, Digital Health Solutions. What we do is provide end-to-end product development consulting, hardware, software. We prepare documentation for submission. We do regulatory submissions as well. And then we do contract manufacturing. So that I would like that to answer a question, right? How am I qualified to speak on this topic? So I'm not a world expert on ISO standard, on ISO 14971 by any stretch. I will not be able to take you chapter by chapter and tell what this standard is about, but I'm somebody who has lived through the standard and help deliver products, help deliver products for my client companies and make them successful. So it has become an essential tool for me as I established a career in medical device companies to first of all serve the patients. Most of our products are for US market, FDA regulated. So to serve American patients, right? That's the ultimate goal for many of us, patients worldwide. And then goal right behind that is to be in compliance with regulatory. So from that vantage point, from that experience, today I'll talk about some topics that would be interesting, maybe answer some questions, and look forward to the rest of the presentations. So what we will cover is, moving beyond checkbox. Yes, you need to be compliant with this tool, but you can do much more than that. How to make it a practical tool to help you in all aspects of maintaining life cycle of a product. your journey does not end with FDA giving clearance for the product. There is a post-market maintenance, revisions of products, etc. This tool is helpful and required every of those stages. And then a topic around how such a folder will help you be at ease on withstanding audit. Seems like most of you are not concerned about audits. That's a great news. Maybe that means you're in early stages of product development, or you're very comfortable that you do the right thing, and then audits are no problem. Either of those are fantastic. So I think we have great audience. And then, ultimately, like we all want, we want to design amazing medical device products, right, that serve our patients and our clinical users. Let me dive into the topic. Why is the standard important to FDA? So, it's a standard that has been well established worldwide, including in FDA regulated industry, showcasing itself as foundational to, at the end, demonstrating that the product we are commercializing after FDA clearance or compliance is safe and effective, right? This tool helps us do that. So that's why FDA recognizes that and wants to make sure it's an essential part of what you do. Now, this tool, the process is employed through design controls and helps deliver documents in design history folder, soon to be under umbrella of MDF. Right, risk management is a process that's applied during design input phases, product development phases, V&V phases, labeling as well. Now, if you have a risk management file, right, that is weak, that typically may create the following problems. When you submit, you will get deficiency, right? FDA will clearly see that everything is not tied up, especially if you may be new to this or not an expert to this, right? So that would be an impact of weak risk management. You may not get clearance or there is delay. Now, once you're past that, right, if in case you got lucky, let's say, right, or you're not doing a right thing for post-market, that may lead to post-market issues like complaints or worst case recalls. You don't want that. So this is a standard that is not a formality. It helps you achieve all those objectives. And you'll see a pattern in my slides. A key message I would like to deliver is FDA does not approve your risk files. FDA will evaluate your risk files and ensure your risk management process supports development of safe and effective device through your product development journey and later on as well. Next topic is aligning your strategies, very important topic. And Lola, in case there are any questions, please pause me after any slide or in the middle of the slide as well.
Perfect. I encourage everyone to post your questions in that Q&A chat and I'll feed them to Naveen.
Okay, great. So I want to now give a very valuable insight I developed through my own career journey, right? How this is not a constraint. It's not a formality that will create hurdles. It's a very important strategic tool. So here is how I see things happening on any typical medical device product development. Your regulatory strategy, that would set the rules of the game. How? Right? They would help define working with business and working with clinicians involved to help define intended use. That then will result in classification. Are you a de novo or are you a class 2 510K device, which is similar to the predicates you've identified, which are aligned with the intended use, right? For many of us, that is kind of straightforward, but sometimes it helps think the value of regulatory strategy when you say the obvious, right? And then submission type and the evidence expected, that's very important. Now, if you're making large claims in your intended use, you have a responsibility to prove it, right? With expensive clinical trials, maybe. Now, maybe that's not your business objective. You don't have budget for that. And that is not part of your revision 1 strategy, right? So you would tone your intended use down, your claims down, and go ahead with what makes sense. Regulatory strategy aligned with business strategy, right? Everybody has a budget to work with. 10% startups make it. If you mess this up, this have bad consequences. That's why it's important, right, to establish in your team that regulatory strategy sets the rules of the game. I enjoy precepts. We do a lot of those to be on the same page with FDA. Then where risk management comes in is they operationalize the regulatory strategy. For example, we have a slide about this later. If you are going to be parked under class 1 device, ask is much lighter than a PMA device, for example, right? But all that is aligned with your regulatory strategy and how your submission is going to be. And that has an impact on risk management. And like it mentions, that is an operational activity you undertake. And that would also give input to your engineers, for example, and to people who are involved in B&B. There are two sources of input to requirements for engineers, right? For software requirement, technical requirement, system requirement, and so on. One is from user need, that traces down to a component or discipline level requirement. And second is from risk analysis that also generates controls, which become requirements. Now, risk management, right? If you're doing operations aligned with regulatory, will lead to fewer controls or larger number of controls, and hence verification burden as well, right? So it's very important. All these things are aligned. And then at the end, right, maybe first version of your product serves a small portion of your market, and thus you get FDA clearance, you go to market, make some revenue, let people know who you are. And second revision of product broadens the market, right? In maybe the same market, USA, for example. So all these things are tied together, and risk management plays a very important role. So like my key message says, risk management executes regulatory strategy and guides product roadmap decisions. Going to move to next slides, and unless we have any questions, Lola?
Nothing coming through yet, so you're good to move on.
All right. So, it's good to talk about theory. Let me give some examples, right, on where I have seen value of everything tied together. I'm going to pick up a hypothetical case, right? So pretend we're working on a software as a medical device or an AI tool that the business has decided to park as a CDS tool, clinical decision support system tool. Now, I'll elaborate on that. Let's say if you have an AI tool that may take in data from blood test results from patient, daily data from weight scale through an app for the patient, right? Or blood pressure data daily from patient notes as well. And let's also pretend that this patient is a cardiac patient and their medication is being monitored, right, by the AI tool. But as a tool to advise physician, hey, there were some changes in the lab results or blood pressure values, etc. And based on published guidance, etc., this AI tool adapts, you should double the dose of medication. I'm making this up, right? So if they advise the physician, that's a serious tool, right? Low risk. If they do something, right, somehow connect to a machine and change the dosage for the patient, it is not a CDS tool, right? It's a very important distinction. AI could do something lighter, advise a physician who then writes a prescription, listening to AI, or AI changes the therapy. Very different, right? But your regulatory strategy will define which of these two it is. Let's say they decided it's a tool that just advises physician. But then your risk management team, they were wrong. They misapplied that, right? They have picked a hazard library as if the AI is changing the therapy, right? As if a physician is not in the middle. The impact of that could be, of course, you take many times longer to get clearance for the device because there is a multi-year effort to put together those controls in place, make everything perfect. So that's bad in its own way. Let's say you still did it and you submit it to FDA. They're going to review your file and they're going to see all kinds of severity, which is higher than what is typically seen in a CDS tool. And that they may determine that, well, this is not a CDS tool. It needs to be heavily regulated by FDA, right? And then that becomes a problem. You have to stop what you're doing and begin again, right? So that's what's very important for risk management activities to be very pertinent and aligned with regulatory strategy And this is an example where things could go wrong. But if you align with strategy, your severities would be low. Risk on the map will show up more on green, less on red, and you can move faster. And when review is done, it'll be obvious that risk analysis is not disconnected from intended use. So that's one example.
I had a question, Naveen, that just came
Yes.
in on that. Can AI do the decision on the basis of the standard or guidelines, or is it possible to train them?
I think I've seen it both. So I have seen it where there is a standard which is very complex to understand. Heart failure rejection ratio was a topic there. Only 2% physicians are able to kind of apply it. So complex. But what my client's team did was put together essentially a flow chart, but through data science and AI, etc. But essentially implementing the flow chart, which was very complex, and then that became a medical device product. So it is possible to do that. I've also seen some use cases where you do some training and that becomes your AI ML tool. And then it has to go through validation, aligned with your intended use and claims you're making. So yes, it's possible to do it both ways.
Great, thank you so much. I'm saving some for the Q&A session at the end, so feel free to continue.
Okay, great. So now I'm going to talk about another example I've picked up. And this one is, let's again pretend that there is a hardware device, maybe with software as well, but a traditional physical medical device. You already have FDA clearance on that, right, with your strategy. And now you're going to broaden the strategy. So in this make-believe case, maybe there is a device in the kidney space, right, where you have various stages of kidney failure. Let's assume that the device that got first clearance was cleared for early stage patients, much lesser risk, right, for the patient if there is something wrong with the tool, for example, cleared that way. And then the business decides to expand and go to patients with maybe late stage kidney failure or maybe total kidney failure. So they are under dialysis, right? So regulatory change was made. Hypothetically, you could expand the environment. Maybe some device is designed for hospital use and later expanded to home use, maybe, right? So it could be any of those regulatory changes. Now, when you do risk analysis, if you apply the totally different, severities are totally different. There is no physician to look at the patient. This is a safety critical device now because the patient is total kidney failure in this hypothetical example. So you have to redo risk analysis. Many times people make a mistake where they kind of do a delta on the first revision. When FDA reviews it, right, will not be good because you have not applied the right use case in this case and submitted. So even though in version 1 you were successful in getting clearance, but not doing the right thing when your claims have broadened, may result in a bad outcome, right? If you don't do risk analysis properly. So the key message here is changes in intended use, right? Once you do a later submission, may just invalidate your prior risk assumptions. You have to be thoughtful about that and include all the right claim, including a hazard analysis with a clinical team, for example, a system team, for example, and so on. And then do the proper. Regulatory pathway, of course, drives the risk expectation, right? So if you're building just a simple device like a thermometer, for example, right, that likely is to be class 1 device. And on class 3 device end, let's say you're building a heart pump, the risk management efforts on those two are very, very different, right? Nobody expects you to have a very similar effort and approach required for risk management. So class 1 device, right, based on your intended use, The hazards are going to be kind of very moderate in severity, but you have to put together a hazard library. When you do risk analysis with DFMEA, for example, UFMEA, you may find that you're already in green, and maybe putting a little more controls in place is good enough, and you're good to go. When you move to moderate risk devices, okay, now there are some hazards which may have a higher severity, not all of them, right? And pre-mitigation, they may show up in yellow zone, couple in red zone on the risk matrix. And you would need more controls and more verification on efficacy of those controls. And then you do the submission. When you come to something like an implantable device, safety critical heart pump, for example, you have to do very, very in-depth risk analysis. So I'm going to tap into my past. And in one stage of my career, I worked for an amazing company called Hardware, was acquired by Medtronic. And I learned so much. So what I learned from somebody is there is a risk that a cosmic ray may strike your electronic chip, right? 1 in a million event, may flip a bit. So your rotations per minute instead of 4,000 may appear 1,000, for example, right? Or 0. Okay, so even in that extreme case, if that happens, that would result in somebody dying. You have to take care of that, right? So risk analysis now goes very, very deep. Solution there, by the way, in case you're curious, is to have redundant variables like that, right? So you do some best 2 out of 3 kind of thing in case something very unlikely happens. Cosmic ray hits your electronics and a bit is flipped, right? Nobody thinks about that. Mission critical, safety critical devices, you have to. Otherwise, even that one death, that's not acceptable, right? If it can be prevented. Many times you can't think of everything. But the example was just to show how your risk management activities, the analysis, the controls you put in place are aligned with the risk of the device. Classification of this device is also aligned with the risk. High risk, class 3, moderate, class 2, low risk, class 1, right? Simple as that. Risk is the key thing. Standard is what helps you, right, operationalize the risk. So it's all tied together. So, here's a capture from my experience. Again, I'm not world expert. This is just my experience, my team's experience. What we have seen mistakes being made on risk analysis. Number one is inconsistent intended use across DHF. This is just a clerical thing, right? So I've seen, your intended use may change month to month, for example, as you fine tune that, right? A mistake I've seen people make is, when they have a software development plan, there's a paragraph that describes intended use, which is different than in some other document, in this document, regulatory document, etc. Make sure it's consistent. What my team does is release intended use as its own document. And instead of drafting your own paragraph using your imagination or old version, you just reference it, right? That makes everything super aligned. So make sure it's consistent, and then that problem goes away. Otherwise, various reviewers at FDA would be confused, and that does not look good. The second category I would like to talk about is risk analysis is not grounded in clinical use. So this is where aligning with regulatory strategy and intended use is a must do. For example, if you have a tool that does some blood analysis, right, and tells a physician about some biomarker measurement on that tool. But if the tool is strategically placed as one of the tool physician uses and use their clinical training and other data to make a decision, right, the hazards, the severity associated with hazards are much lower, right, in nature. You cannot, right, be misaligned with regulatory strategy. That would be a disconnect, like I talked earlier, and not result in good outcomes. So that's a second category. Third would be weak linkage between risk controls and V&V. Like I mentioned earlier, when you do risk analysis, you do DFMEA, that's how my team does it, or use FMEA or CFMEA, cybersecurity. That results in establishing controls, right? Because pre-mitigation, you were in the yellow or red zone. Now, once you identify control, you have to track it. We do it by converting those controls into requirements. What happens once you have requirements? You have to verify them, right? In software, various ways, but at least with a test case, which is released before you do formal run, right? Part of test protocol. And then you have a result of test protocol. You need to show full tracing. So tracing from test report upstream to test case to the requirement to DUT, right? The software release or device release, we are validating or verifying, and on the way back to risk analysis, right? So without all the tracing and linkages between controls of risk and proving it's effective, it's not complete. Many mistakes are made like that because of, again, clerical reasons, and that results, unfortunately, in slowing down of clearance or not getting clearance. Post-market, very important to do post-market with complaints, CAPA, SBOM monitoring for cybersecurity, right? Without doing that, you're not going to, do the right thing to your patient and be compliant with FDA. So key message here is what you see is these findings by FDA are driven by inconsistency avoidable. Weak justification, if you put a little bit extra time, 1% extra on the project would not be the case. And, unnecessarily missing documents. Connect the dots for them. Don't assume they will connect dots themselves. Do connect the dots. That's it, right? And then you avoid large portion of issues that come once you submit to FDA.
Naveen, we had a question come in. You showed the three classifications and the risk levels associated with each. Somebody asked, what class would a SAMD, which is used by clinicians for diagnostic purposes, fall under? So the SAMD itself isn't the sole diagnostic tool, but it provides the clinician with some sort of verification tool. It might be a bit subjective, but I'd love to know your answer for that.
Yeah, so in those scenarios, thank you very much, Lola. That's an excellent question. So I'll tell if such a question came to me from one of our clients, what would we do? So in my company, we have engineers and we also have some amazing, very experienced regulatory experts as well. So, I'll naturally pull them in this discussion. So I guess it will go back to the intended use you want to establish as you commercialize your SMD device, right? And what your business strategy on what market to capture and so on. So if you want to go light, right, we'll say it's a CDS tool that produces result, but there is sentences in the intended use that justifies that, look, physician needs to use their training and other means to take this advice from the tool, but then make a decision as a trained physician as well. Then the risk is low, right? You're parking on the risk on physician. But if you want to go aggressive and not let, maybe providers who are lesser trained be involved in the process as well, you would craft intended use to be stronger. In either of those two cases, we'll look for predicate devices that have made similar claims in the past. If you find them and they are registered with FDA or they got clearance with FDA, you'd be able to see with their K number on FDA website what codes apply to them. And perhaps all of those codes or some of those codes apply to you, right? So when you submit, you identify your codes, your predicate devices, your indications for use, and so on. And you're all set, parking it as a low-risk device or a moderate-risk device. Also, you have a fantastic tool in form of pre-submission meeting to review these with FDA and see if they agree with you, right? So we do that on many of our projects. We build our regulatory strategy, do a pre-submission meeting with FDA, align with FDA on classification of device, on the codes, for example, on predicate devices, for example, and then also on the level of burden required for BNB, the amount of clinicals we need to do, huge impact on the time it takes on clinicals, as well as the money you spend on the clinicals. Pre-submitting is a great tool. Sometimes it does not make sense when you're confident. Don't slow yourself down. But big risk mitigation tool on surprise mitigation, right? And when you do a submission. So that's how we handle it, Lord.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I've saved some more for the Q&A at the end.
Okay, great. Quick time check. We are halfway through the meeting. Maybe I'll speed up some, Lola, but you keep me checked.
Perfect.
Okay, great. So, the standard, right? The standard has many phases. First is risk management planning, where you would do your plan document, you establish your risk matrix, etc., all aligned with regulatory strategy. And then second one is where heavy analysis happens. My team does in two portions. We do hazard library development, where a team, definitely including clinical team, systems and risk team, are involved in establishing a hazard library. And my team then does a DFMEA with engineers who would do a component failure analysis on electronic board, on the software design, and so on. And the engineers don't have the luxury of picking up severity associated with a failure. They have to map it to one of the line items in the hazard library established by clinical and risk team, right? Which is then aligned with the regulatory strategy. But of course, we depend on engineers to identify component failures that may happen. Then they map it to the risk associated with the hazard. They get the severity. They work out likelihood, probability of that happening. And that tells you pre-mitigation risk. And that tells you need to put controls to address the risk or not, right? So things are fed into engineer from risk team, and they're able to take their design to the next level, identifying controls they have to put in place, and only those, so that time is not wasted, money is not wasted on putting controls not required. More important, you don't miss putting a control for something you need to put in place. So once that analysis is done, DFMEA, then you go ahead, design iteration of the board, your product, etc., and then do DNB. And same goes for post-market surveillance. Key message, FDA will review that you have applied risk management across entire life cycle, because guesswork and intuition may get you close, but not all the way there. And they want to make this objective, right? Maybe you have an amazing engineering team, but how do they know? They would know by reviewing your documentation. Again, some elaboration on how we use hazard analysis to do an effective DFMEA. Effective DFMEA is important because that's the only place for our approach, right? Hazard separately, then DFMEA. To identify controls that need to be put in place, put them there and verify. So hazard analysis, like I mentioned, sets the context. Severity determination would tell you which components, right, to make more robust, for example, what software modules to develop, for example, right, put in credentialing, login and password for software, encrypt the data during transmit. It's obvious to us, but risk analysis points out non-obvious things as well. So DFME is built on hazard analysis, and controls flow from hazard activity. Message here, strong hazard analysis gives good input to your engineering team, ensures good DFMEA focus for right risk and control. By the way, it's not just DFMEA, but also for cybersecurity FMEA, if you apply that process, and also for use-related FMEA. We call it UFMEA. Now, I'm going to go through some tips for optimizing hazard analysis, right? So it's a bunch of things I said earlier. You should anchor your hazard analysis to intended use and to foreseeable misuse, both from a design perspective and a usability perspective. You should design hazards at use level, not at component level. Leave it to the FMEA. That's the approach we take. This avoids, generic template-driven paper pushing kind of activity, and results in something we all passionately believe in. I know, serving our patients and introducing amazing medical device products to the world. And then you have to do this across all domains: hardware, software, system behavior, usability, cybersecurity, etc. Right? And then establishing severity of trend becomes very important. Key message here is hazard analysis defines what should be controlled before you do select controls and then perform a verification of controls. I'll keep going, Lola, unless there are questions.
Yeah, actually, we did get one question that came in that said, now that the FDA moves to the QMSR and aligns with ISO 1345 and 14971, will they still allow risk analysis based only on FMEA? In the EU, FMEA alone is not enough because it doesn't find risks related to normal use, only failure.
I'm not sure about that answer. Like I mentioned, my team does hazard analysis and DFMEA both for the reasons I spoke about. So that has been our go-to process. We have always been leveraging 13485 even for FDA-regulated products because it's more comprehensive, allows our clients to take our deliverables at DHF, not just for US submission, but worldwide submission as well, right? So we always were aligned in our journey on all our projects with 13485. So specifically for us, would not change our process is my expectation. But if the audience member who asked that question would like to reach out to me, I'll get an answer through the regulatory lead in my team. Unfortunately, I don't know personally.
Perfect. Thank you, Naveen.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about software, right? Software and cybersecurity are super important for obvious reasons to FDA for safety concerns about the patient, right? A software failure may stop your heart pump, right? Cannot happen, right? Somebody would die. The software is absolutely part of that. When you do software risk analysis, right, it's a little bit off topic. You write code for software, that's your own code, and you need to comply with 62304, including risk analysis identified by that standard, of course, besides 14971 and doing all design controls. But what about third-party products, right? In software, there is so much code that's generated by open source community, libraries that you license from some other people, etc. In software world, that's parked as soup, right? That's traditionally what we call it, software of unknown provenance. Now, you don't need to own that code, but you need to do risk analysis on the use case for that code towards your device. For example, if you are using a large library that may do a bunch of things, but you're using it for, say, storing data, right, on your storage chip, for example, you would need to do then a risk analysis on the SOAP on those use cases. Does it effectively store data and let you retrieve it? So that's your responsibility on SOAP analysis, part of risk management. And you have to do that under your software development activity. In that example, you don't have to validate everything that tool may do for you, just how you use that tool, right? So knowing what to do in software in context of risk analysis, when you think about it, is intuitive, but doing it is important. Documenting it is super important. Cybersecurity, as we all know, there are bad people in the world, right? You don't want your device to be vulnerable and a hacker coming in for reasons that they would know and causing damage to a connected device, harming the patient. That can happen. That does happen. Bad for business, very bad for people. You cannot let it happen. FDA knows that. And that's why there is a newest version of guidance document this year from FDA. They will not let you get clearance without a proper cybersecurity file, unless your device is made of wood. It probably is a cyber device, right? Even if software runs on your device, or if you have a chip that may have some software, you are a cyber device. Yes, you have to show that you don't have any connectivity because of controls you've put in place, right? You're still a cyber device. You have to show those controls are there and prove that keep you non-connected. We move to next slide. Second, please. There we go. So this talks about, what I already spoke about, how cybersecurity may create hazardous conditions. And look, it's not an IT issue anymore. It's a real safety issue because most devices nowadays leverage the benefits that come with connectivity, a lot of benefits, but you have responsibilities as well, right? As you make these medical devices. FDA is not putting these as hurdles because they enjoy it. It's because of safety. They're in charge of making sure US citizens, US patients are safe. That's all they're doing. And you're required to do that as part of your submissions. And not just submissions, those regulations, guidances, etc., as they get released, you are expected to show compliance on those surprise audits that may have happened, may not have happened, right? So you have to be current on cybersecurity. Because your product is 6-year-old is not an excuse. So what's the message? When cybersecurity can affect device behavior or availability, right? It must also, risk must be managed, right? And becomes part of 14971, aligned with not just 14971, right? But the standard you have decided to follow, or in context of cybersecurity, or just complying with FDA guidance on cybersecurity. So those cybersecurity, I'm going to call it IT or privacy specific standards, do apply. In addition, 14971 also applies. Why? Because of safety. So there's a slide that tries to capture it all together, right? Integrated software, cybersecurity, and usability. Very important because of software failures, vulnerabilities on cybersecurity, use errors that can hurt the patient. So it's safety, and hence the standard applies. Key message there: effective risk management requires addressing interacting risks, right? All these things need to come together. You cannot tweak up your cybersecurity, make it unusable, right? And pose all kinds of safety risk on the patient, or put so many non-cybersecurity safety risk in place that cybersecurity vulnerability opens up. Everything has to work together and do the right thing by the patient. So this slide talks about how FDA views hazards of a connected device. There could be, it's a repeat of what I said, maybe software specific, cybersecurity, use specifics, and you have to identify failures across all of these. Make sure they're implemented, do iterations to make sure some control in cybersecurity work doesn't make it unusable, right? So you have to kind of do these iterations and then finalize your product. So they will evaluate system level hazardous situation, not just isolated effort, and one team is not talking to team next to them. Now, residual risk analysis and risk benefit analysis, it's actually a very important tool, I believe, for you, right? For example, as a consumer, when I think about the pharma world, right, any medication, maybe most medication you take, they have a side effect, even Tylenol or Advil, right? Everything has a side effect. Some drugs have black label, right? Bad stuff can happen. So we don't have, perfect therapies in the world. Maybe some are, but not. Most therapies are not. Applies to medical devices as well. You may have some residual risk that you have attempted to bring risk as low as possible, right? And they're still in the yellow zone. Potentially for a class 3 device, they're still in the red zone. But you need to capture a risk-benefit analysis to help FDA reviewer be your advocate, right, and support you. So without taking advantage of this fantastic opportunity you have to do a risk-benefit analysis towards the end of your risk management project, goes in your summary file for risk management as well, would be a missed opportunity. You have to build a strong case for that so that when a reviewer reviews it, just like a judge in court, they hear two lawyers, this lawyer and the other lawyer, right? And then they make an impartial judgment. So help them help you by building a strong risk-benefit analysis, right? So they do expect it. It helps them. They don't know your device as well as you do. So you should help them by making a strong case and a compelling benefit risk analysis if there is a need. So this slide talks about how objective evidence supports risk decisions. There should be traceability, consistent intended use, and don't forget post-market surveillance responsibility. In cybersecurity, you've got to monitor your SBOM, software bill of material. Without that, you'll be out of compliance.
So Naveen, and I'll just hop in there to do the quick time check. We've got about 5 minutes left before we pass over to Colin for the demo.
Okay, got it, got it. Thank you. I'm going to try and make best use of the 5 minutes. So, the standard supports reasonable. Reasonable is important. Assurance of safety and efficacy. Class 1, very different than class 3, right? Intended use drives what FDA expects for risk expectation, of course, besides classification. End-to-end, everything integrated, everybody telling same story together, very important. Right? Remember, FDA is not expert on your device. You are. You need to make life a little easier for them to review things because they are put together very well, all tied up, so they can give you clearance. And strong management, risk management will make really your clearance go faster. So, underlying message, this is important. Strong risk management does not slow down your FDA review, right? But weak management, definitely. Weak risk management will slow you down. This is, I guess, I've reached to the end of my slides, Lola. Good time.
Perfect. Yeah, no, brilliant timing. Thank you so much. And we have some questions to go through for the Q&A session, which is great. So now for us at Qualio, ISO 14971 compliance challenges that have been discussed, they're not just something for medical device software companies to think about. As an EQMS provider with hundreds of medical device and SAMD customers, understanding where regulatory professionals are being challenged by regulatory compliance and how to alleviate that burden is a critical part of our product development roadmap. So we've therefore been considering these challenges and working on something very exciting to share with our current and future customers, which we launched only a couple of months ago. So here's a quick teaser before our Q&A from Colin in the Qualio product team.
Thanks, Laura. My name is Colin Feely. I'm a member of the product team in Qualio, not Qualin, close enough, Lola. But I'm joining you from Cork in Ireland, and great to see everyone from all over the world today. And thank you, Naveen, for an excellent presentation. Like lots of really good information in there, and some really interesting questions as well I see coming in. But as Lola said, we're after launching a new product. It's a compliance-related product that sits next to our QMS. And we got into this space because we found that a lot of people were trying to use their QMS to cover all their compliance needs. And yes, your QMS is certainly a foundation, but we see people, as we saw earlier, using shared drives, using spreadsheets to help maybe collate information, manage work, kind of becomes project management tools. And we decided to build a tool specifically for this that sits next to our QMS and leverage AI at key points in the workflow and allow you to use AI in a more general sense throughout that as well. So it's a centralized location for your compliance needs. It gives you a systematic approach to it. And as you can see here, we have a number of different, what we call frameworks, or it would be standards. 9001, 13485, 4201, we've 2701 down further as well. 14971 isn't here today. It's currently in draft. So we develop these standards ourselves. We review them internally and we get them externally reviewed before they are released. And I'm going to use 9001 and 13485 to kind of work through this demonstration. So what is within a given standard? So it is the list of requirements associated with that standard. Now, because of copyrights with ISO, we reword the requirements slightly, and then we map controls to the requirements. Additionally, we have statuses of where you are in terms of relation to how you feel you have met to a given standard, so you can see your progress. And we also have gaps and tasks. And this forms the kind of basis of a framework and a basis of your compliance work. Now, we're going to use an example to work through, and we're going to use a control, and the controls are really the kind of the basis of a lot of the work within this space. And a control is how we recommend that you meet a standard. And we have two types of controls. I'm going to use this one, complaint management control. It is essentially a bucket for where you can store your policies, procedures, work instructions, and the objective evidence of your of the output of those processes. Now, ideally today, I'd be doing something on risk and different types of risk, but we'll go with this because this is set up and we'll be able to explain everything through here. So this allows you, as I said, to collate and organize that information. Now, to do that across a whole standard, it can be take quite a lot of time. So we have a number of things that can help you do that. The first thing we have here is what's called fetch. This will scan your QMS and try to automatically find policies, procedures, and work instructions pertaining to this control. And anywhere you see this little guy here, that shows you that AI has done that. So you've got kind of traceability there, but you can also attach your own. Now, further then, another thing we have here is what's called monitors. And this allows you to set up rules to automatically collect evidence as it's outputted. So in this case, we can set up a rule that will automatically collect complaints as they're closed. In the case of risk, we could be collecting risk plans, we could be collecting risk assessments, we could be collecting risk files, doing that at the organization or the product level. Now, we can also go a bit further. We have an AI assistant here. So I have a little bit of text here I copied earlier. All right, great earlier. So we'll just pop in here. Now I'll let this run. I'm just going to say, what would you recommend we put in the definition of the complaint management control, QMC 21? And he's going to go away and he's going to think about that and come back to me in a minute. So that's the first thing, is the organization and collation of the information against the controls, which then sit against the requirements. Now, as we can see here, there was no gaps found. So once you have your information collated, we have an analysis of your definitions. That's seeing if your definitions meet the controls and the associated requirements, and an analysis of your evidence. So you can see here, he's coming back and he's going to give me some information on it. And you can chat with this more to get more information. It's basically saying SOP 17 and work instruction 5, which we already have here, and potentially QM 1, which will be our quality manual. So it looks like I'm in a really good place. So it allows you to double check what you're doing or give you more information. And jumping back in, we've analyzed definitions, which will analyze your definitions, and we analyze your evidence. Now, we analyze your evidence. We do that against the rules you have set out in your policies, procedures, and work instructions. We extract them, and that's what we analyze your evidence against. In this case, you can see here that there's no gaps, right? Now, controls are also used across frameworks. So if I jump into 13485, I've gone from 9001 and now I'm in 13485, and we look here for complaints. We're also going to see complaint management in here in this framework as well, and we can see that there is a gap here. So the gap analysis runs specific to the framework. So you can have a control setup that is perfect for 9001 that may have an issue with 13485, because 13485 is a more specific standard with higher levels of requirements. And this is where we get our gaps. And this is what, in this case, it recommends that you include sharing information with suppliers, distribution, and regulatory bodies or other equivalent external stakeholders. It's saying that our communication, we don't have anything in place to communicate complaint information to external parties, and it's saying we should. Now, we have a number of choices with this. We can, I'll jump into that in a minute, review with AI, dismiss or resolve. But this is going to give us a list of all of our gaps associated with our information. And from our customers using this, they're kind of telling us that to get through this level of gap analysis is extremely difficult, would be extremely time consuming. So it gives them a roadmap of improvements to work through. So jumping back into my complaint management, sorry, into my complaint management. So that's the second thing, is that gap analysis, right? That's the second thing. Now, the third thing is what we do with that gap. And we have another assistant here. Now, he knows about this gap. We can get more information on the gap if we want to decide what we want to do, but we can also get him to help us remediate it. Now, I'm going to press that. He's going to start working there, right? And I know I've done this a few times. So what he's going to do is he's going to suggest a couple of things. He's going to suggest attaching another document to the definition, and he's going to update an existing one. And it can take action in certain cases. If I'm the owner of a document, it can create a new draft for me automatically from here, and it can suggest text based on the gap to update that. So we'll let him run there. He'll be working away. The other approach to remediation we can take is we can create a task, and we can assign that out to one of the members of our team who's going to receive that in their dashboard, and they're going to be able to take that action to update that SOP, policy, procedure, or work instruction. Now, once they're updated, any update is going to be automatically picked up, as well as any new piece of evidence, and we can rerun an analysis. And if that gap is then closed, it will automatically close the gap for us as well, thus closing that loop and remediating the issue. I'll leave him there. He's going to come back in a second. The final thing we can do is, you can see that this framework's in a state is what's called implementing. In that case, any gap analysis that's run is manually run by me by clicking these buttons. So I decide when it happens. However, we can go into a status of implementing, in which case the AI or the analysis will run automatically. And that's when you're in this kind of continuous monitoring mode. Anytime a policy, procedure, or work instruction here is updated, that analysis is going to kick off. Anytime a new piece of evidence is automatically collated or you add it, it's automatically going to kick off. And any gaps that are found will change the status of the requirement into attention required. So you're notified and it will be added to the list of gaps. So you know you need to work through it, putting you in a more proactive position. So he's come back here with 2 recommendations. And the 2 recommendations, as I thought, were update SOP 17 to customer complaints. Now he's saying here the case is the owner of that document, so we're not going to be able to do that. That's, in this case, I would create a task for that. But it's also saying attach policy to organizational communication policy. And I think it's saying make some updates to this as well to look after external parties. So it's helping me to sort out the gap and put myself in a good place ahead of any given audit. So that covers the main demo for today. I hope that was interesting and useful. Sorry I didn't have 14971 to run through. I think it would have been a bit more pointed, but I think you get the idea of what it could do. And we will have 14971 next month, and we are working on product level compliance as well, where you can associate the documentation for a given product or version of a product for a submission or a tech file in this as well. And just one more point as well, actually something that Naveen mentioned, the number one risk, the intended purpose being inconsistent in documentation. As part of the product level compliance, one thing we are working on is the ability to embed pieces of content that are centrally managed. So you can define your intended purpose for a product once, and you can then embed that text, and that text will appear within all of the relevant documents for that product. So you remove any possibility of inconsistency and remove that risk. So I did mention that one as well. Okay. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm going to stop sharing.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Colin. We did get a couple of inquiries in the chat about the compliance tool that Colin was showcasing. So as I said, if you want more information, please reach out to us. We're more than happy to share information with you after the webinar about compliance intelligence. So hopefully that's given you all a flavor of a real example of what's possible when AI and medical device risk and quality compliance intersect. Yeah, as I said, if you want to see it in more detail, just visit the link that we will be providing and book a demo with us. So that brings us for the last few minutes of the webinar to the Q&A session. I have about 6 or 7 questions that I want to get through here with Naveen. So I'll start asking those straight away, and if more pop up, please continue to use that Q&A chat. Perfect. So Naveen, near the start, you spoke about the ISO 14971 lifecycle reviewed by the FDA. A general question, what's the recommended sequence for risk documentation under ISO 14971? Should a preliminary hazard analysis typically come first to identify the hazards and assess the initial risk levels, or can other approaches be used?
We always do preliminary hazard analysis and even preliminary DFMEA because that becomes a guiding tool for engineering. I think it's also expected. So I'm going to say yes and yes, expected and good practice.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thanks for sending in that question. So the next one relates to AI. We need to comply with the EU Artificial Intelligence Act. If Europe has a standard for AI management and a separate one for risk analysis, how should they be related to ISO 14971? So they're referring to ISO 4201 and ISO 23894.
Okay. So I'm going to broader expertise with the FDA, so I'm going to speak on the topic from that perspective. I think they both go hand in hand, like I mentioned, right? Remind me the question, is it cybersecurity and risk?
Yeah, so they're saying if Europe has a standard for AI management and a separate one for risk analysis, how do they relate?
So I think you have to make both happy, right? There is no other way, and they cannot be in conflict. So if you're using an AI-based solution, maybe rigor is higher in context of a risk analysis. Maybe they expect to treat it at a higher level depending on your intended use. So I'm able to answer in those general sense. You kind of have to be in compliant with both the standards, and it's an integrated approach. For example, what does AI do? Right? Is it going to recommend something to a physician that may ignore that recommendation or do something about it? That's a much lower risk, right? And potentially all activities you do for AI would then be in compliance. Again, I'm not familiar with the European standard on regulating AI, but as I apply kind of general judgment, that's how I would see it. You have to be in compliance with the AI standard, but your starting point would be intended use. How do you intend to use the device? If the device is going to use AI to make changes in the therapy you're getting with, for example, a pain management implant device, right? Then validation is much stronger. Risk analysis is very heavy. So you identify all the controls that need to be put in place and implement. So in context of a US submission we were making, how to handle AI responsibly, that's how I would do it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. The next question that we have is, how would you recommend controlling security standards in SAMD, software as a medical device, if you're using them?
So, you need to make sure there is a privacy concerns address about your SAMD, right? That's very important. Besides the safety of the device. So if it's a SAMD device, your responsibility is for ensuring all the usual things. Design control processes may be aligned with 13485. Those apply, right? Your 62304, it's software. It does apply. And of course, risk management applies as long as, a regulatory body is going to regulate the product. So SAMD could be a low risk SAMD class 1. Still risk management applies. Class 2, it does. Or maybe it's a de novo. You will determine the risk later because there is no predicate. So it still applies. So yes, answer is yes. It is still a part of a process you have to undertake to be in compliance, and not just for paperwork. It becomes important so that your SAMD is robust. That's what it's supposed to do, right? So from business perspective too, it's a terrific tool to make sure you have designed and commercialized a great medical device product.
Perfect. Thank you so much. A general question that's come in. When do you recommend a company starts their risk management activities?
I think I'm going to answer in two portions. One is to have a QMS and SOPs in place, right? The sooner the better. Now, in context of a specific project, I think once you are besides just proof of concept and R&D, right? You don't need to start it too early, in my opinion, especially for startup companies. But once you are taking it seriously, it's moving from a research phase to, hey, let's go and submit, be compliant with regulations and release it with registering with the FDA because it's a 510(k) exempt product, or doing the submission or doing a pre-sub. That's where regulatory strategy, these intended use, predicate selection, right, etc., come into place. And you've decided to undertake design controls and put together a project management plan document to be compliant with a product development, software development plan. At that time, you would have a regulatory plan and definitely risk management plan, right? That's what standard also says. Put together a plan document. So in my company, we really do product development in 3 phases. Phase 1 is plan and design input. That's where you would have first activities on risk management as well, right? Along with user need, requirements analysis, lower level requirements, etc. Preliminary hazard analysis would also be part in the phase 1. And then in phase 2, you do design development and design outputs and test protocols with dry run. In phase 3, you do formal run, right? And risk management follows through in phase 2 and phase 3 as well. But once we have established that this is a product we are going to commercialize, we begin with plan and preliminary risk analysis.
Great, thanks for your insights. Another one that's come in is, how did you make the link between design inputs, design outputs, and the control plan and risk analysis?
Yeah, that's a very important topic. I'm going to give a sort of a non-answer. It's something you have to do tracing across all activities. So let me elaborate a little bit broader than the question. You need to have your user needs at very top. Those are kind of black box, market intended, kind of requirements, right? Below them, typically we do system level requirement. Those are engineering specification at the device level, system level. Below that, we have software requirements, electrical requirements, and so on. Everything traces. So every software requirement should trace up to a system requirement, which should trace up to a user need, and then tracing down to a user needs to have a child in form of systems requirement, and maybe your requirement ends at system, but typically would have a component at software requirement SRS level. So you need to show tracing. Like I mentioned, how we handle this is for risk controls is with requirements. Separately from user need, you do risk analysis, establish a hazard library. I'm going to pick an example for a software team. They do DFMEA, software DFMEA, identify a new control, right? Data packet integrity, for example. And they may be using CRC check, for example, right? So that, okay, you have identified that you need to put a control and you've defined the control. How do you track it, right? So that usually best way is to generate a requirement, which represents the control. Requirement goes to software team. It may say the system shall do a CRC check, right, for data packet integrity. Trace better than what I said. But that becomes a software requirement, and the coder will implement it. Tester will create a test case. You do show tracing from test case to this requirement, and various kinds of tracing depending on nature of the project, from a STD section, from a unit test, for example, on this requirement on the developer world, and test case in the VNV world. And then when you do a report, the whole protocol is run and you have pass. Or in case you had an issue, you're able to justify it. So that's how all the tracing happens all the way to risk activities, also alongside with the user need activities. And that is essential. Without that, a reviewer at FDA would not be able to essentially connect your dots. With tracing, you're connecting the dots.
Perfect. Thank you so much. With all the clients that you've worked with, what do they find most challenging about risk management? Where do you find you're helping them most with their risk management activities?
So, I'll give my personal challenge with risk management, right? There are some things that I like riding a bicycle. Once you learn how to ride a bicycle, 20 years later, you get on a bicycle, you don't forget, right? There are many things like that to me that are natural, like coding, for example. I'm not as sharp as I used to be, but I can still code. But risk analysis, I get rusty faster than any other topic. So general topic of risk analysis, what is harm, what is hazard, what is risk, kind of confuses me. The best thing I do is apply real time on projects. I learn from my team, learn from wonderful regulatory experts we have in our team, learn from our clients as well. Just kind of keeping all these definitions organized, what happens before, which part, and after, continues to be a little struggle. Even though I'm a speaker here, I find that challenging, but very, very important to stay sharp on that, because this is a very valuable tool, results in high quality product. So my clients struggle with that thing too. Okay, we need to show compliance with risk management, help us lead that. And then towards the end of the project, they come out learning the value of risk management, right? Why it's important and how to do it as well.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to go with one or two more questions before we wrap the webinar up. I had an attendee ask, what is the difference between ISO 10993-1 and 14971? So that's the biological evaluation of medical devices.
Oh, I have a short answer. I don't know.
Okay, no problem. What we can do is, if the attendee that sent that in wants to connect with me directly,
Yes.
I'm happy to answer that after the webinar.
Yep.
Perfect.
And thank you, Lila. I would like to kind of encourage that attendee to reach out to me as well. Like I mentioned, I also have a way bigger experts than me in my team. I promise I'll get back to you with an answer.
Fantastic. And that's actually a great thing for me to say to everybody here is that there are a number of questions that came in that we're not going to get to today. Naveen has asked he'd love to connect with people personally to respond to them. So his contact details will be provided with the email that goes out after this webinar. Perfect. So I'll go for one last question. This actually came in twice. I may need the attendee to provide extra information if Naveen isn't able to answer it, but let's go with how it's written here. How to add the IEC 66601-1-2, the biological evaluation series standard. Most of the time, there's no product-based standards that kind of explain what you do. How do you add the risks there per FMEA based on those standards?
So again, I'm not leading expert in 60601, but as we work with companies like Intertech and SCS, etc., right, to do some evaluation for the standard and give us results, create report for us. They do ask to review a risk analysis file, right? So the expectation before they can finish their work is to present a finished risk management file. So they need you, just FDA may need you to clear your product, right? Give you 510(k) clearance. Even 60601 folks, before they give you a certification, they need to ensure that you have complied with 14971, built a complete risk management file. So Lola, that's the best I can answer in context of the question.
No, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. I think I'm going to wrap things up here. We've answered a lot of what's come through. As I mentioned, there's some that haven't been, but Naveen would love to hear from you directly to answer those queries. Thank you so much to everyone for participating. I hope you all learned something new today. The session is recorded and it will be emailed to you soon. I want to personally thank Naveen for his time and answering the questions today. Naveen, is there anything you would like to add before we finish up?
Yeah, I'm very easy to find on LinkedIn, right? I just type my name. I don't think there is any individual with my name. You'll find me. So connect with me on LinkedIn and I'll do my best to answer your question. And Lola, this was very enjoyable for me. Thank you for making it so successful for me. And Ian, thanks for doing everything you did and setting this up.